Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today. I got a very special guest with me, so why don't you say hi, Audrey?
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
Audrey just graduated from the British School Manila, right? And she's an incoming freshman at Stanford University in California. So now, if you haven't caught it on our page yet, later this month we will be doing a very special 2 day series called Hiatus. Hiatus will be covering two main topics, and one is the student entrepreneurship phenomenon, and the second is entrepreneurship in a COVID economy. So Audrey's going to be sharing her story later this month in this series of ours.
Thank you again for having me. My name is Audrey Pe. I am 19 years old and the founder and executive director of WiTech, which is short for Women in Technology. We are a global youth run nonprofit based here in Manila, Philippines, that aims to educate, inspire, and empower youth to break gender barriers and use tech to make a difference in society. In 2018, we hosted the first Women in Tech conference for students and vice students in the Philippines, co presented by Accenture. And we also have a Women in Tech Teach program that has been brought to different marginalized areas of the country and has taught over 100 students how to code for the first time. Overall, at VTEC, we aim to build a future where all youth, regardless of their gender or socioeconomic status, have access to technology and the potential to use it for social good. And as of August 2020, we're really happy to announce that we have 12 different chapters from 4 countries around the world. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
That really gives us a picture of what you've been doing for the past few years. On a more personal side though, like what are you going to take up in college?
Yeah, my incoming college course. So it's an intended course because at Stanford we don't have to declare a major until our second year. But I
Mm-hmm.
am an incoming potentially science, technology, and society, or STS for short, major. And for those of you that aren't familiar, because it's quite an uncommon course, STS really deals with the intersections of STEM and the humanities and asking questions about how technology influences society and how society in turn influences technology. So it's kind of perfect for what I want to do kind of in life and studying like the intersections of tech and education.
Now that you're just about to enter college, right? Can you give us a short background or context of like whom you were prior to graduating? Maybe like this will cover high school or perhaps related extracurriculars outside of women in tech.
So for context, I graduated from British School Manila in 2019, took a gap year before going to Stanford
Mm,
this year. But
okay.
prior to my last 2 years in BSM, which I did the IB in, I went to Multiple Intelligence, which is a local school here in Quezon City, Philippines, that basically is a progressive school. So for all the way from preschool up until grades 10, I was in multiple intelligence, MI for short. And the school really has like this mindset of making sure that all students excel holistically. So I say holistically because there's an emphasis on the arts, an emphasis on the different intelligences, the theory of the multiple intelligences, and that a kid could not or just does not excel like academically, but also like linguistically in terms of the musical intelligence, artistic intelligence, bodily kinesthetic. Like it's a whole theory that you can look up
Yeah.
online. But
Yeah.
basically, that mindset was instilled in me at a very young age. That thought process that being a good student isn't just like the end goal. It's making like an impact in my community because MI's slogan was like to make a difference in the world. So having that kind of mindset from an early age, we also had to do lots of projects, lots of community building projects from I think middle school up until high school. So every single year, individual year in groups, we had to lead a service project. And I personally really enjoyed that. And I got a really good, I think, number of experiences doing fundraising, going out to communities, teaching different skills. Like teaching at some point, I would teach like storytelling sessions, English sessions at different like public schools. So it was a lot of outreach, especially, and that trickled into I think a lot of what we do in WeTech as well. Kind of
Mm-hmm.
fast
Mm-hmm.
forward to my high school years, I transferred to BSM because I really wanted to take the International Baccalaureate or IB program. And my parents and I talked it through, and I'm very lucky that they believe in the value of education and in the IB, and that it would prepare me really well for studies abroad. So we transferred me to BSM, and there I was able to, for the first time in my life, formally study things like computer science, like
Okay.
psychology,
Yeah.
disciplines that I was interested in before, but never really got the chance to study because in the local Philippine system, I was limited to taking kind of like this generic science class, English class. I wasn't able to go into specific disciplines. Whereas jumping into the IB, everything was so exciting for me because for the first time, I was studying things like language and literature in a
Mm-hmm.
formal setup wherein we got to talk about not just language, but intersections of language and sociology, language and psychology, and just things like that. Just really excited me that the option of choosing my subjects in the IB, the freedom of really exploring things in depth at a higher level or at HL, as us
Yeah.
IB kind of veterans would say. And that really shaped me and challenged me a lot because, not going to lie, I found it really difficult. I was coming from a school that had the local Philippine curriculum, and to be quite blunt, like our English curriculum and our math curriculum at MI was very, very different from the
Mm-hmm.
IB. So I found myself playing catch up for so much of my first couple of months in IB and first year really in IB. So I
Okay.
would always be kind of struggling to keep up with my classes and trying to give 110% because I wanted to like do my absolute best because I'm really type
Yeah.
A like that. But with that said, I did do things outside. I did like Model UN, I did student council for a bit, tennis varsity. But when I wasn't studying, I really was mostly focused on WiTech because that was
Mm.
really growing into a full-fledged nonprofit during my junior and
I
senior
see.
years of high school.
I know you touched on WeTech a while ago in like their introduction and in the previous question, but would you be able to give us a more general idea of what is it you're doing and how sort of like it impacts the community?
So with WeTech, we really began as a blog in 2016 that was used to feature the different stories of women in technology that I had networked with, and met online via platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn.
Mm,
And
okay.
these were women in tech that I had reached out to because I was very tired of seeing and being presented by society role models in tech like Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk. I was tired of like middle-aged white men being shoved kind of at the forefront of tech, and I really wanted to discover a more diverse set of women in tech to look up to, ones that I could relate to, especially as a Filipina. So that's what started the WeTech blog. Fast forward a couple of months after, I was writing articles continuously alone, like in my childhood bedroom right here, and I fell really into this slump because I didn't know if we were actually doing anything as a blog that was helping solve the gender gap in tech. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, we were inspiring people and we were getting a lot of nice online feedback. People were saying, oh, these women in tech are so inspiring and stuff like that. But what good is inspiration really if it doesn't lead to action? Just like with my favorite example for this is the climate action movement. If people just like repost and repost all these nice like infographics about climate change, like that actually doesn't mean anything
Mm,
unless
yeah,
people
yeah.
adapt, right? And they actually make more sustainable choices in terms of their lifestyles. So same goes for the gender gap in tech. And that idea, like how to turn inspiration into action for the gender gap in order to help close the gap itself, really permeated in WeTech, transforming from a blog into a community organization that hosted the first Women in Tech conference for students and by students in the Philippines. And that, on the other hand, was really not just born out of that thought process, but also born out of constantly being really tired of seeing events wherein all the judges, speakers, mentors were men. And
Okay.
when I'd meet like these few other teenage girls at these events, we'd kind of band together and I joked like, why don't we just start our own event geared towards diversity and inclusivity? Like we shouldn't be waiting for adults to put forth solutions that we so honestly need in our community if we want a more equitable tech industry. So we're really glad to have had two women in tech conferences so far in partnership with Accenture Philippines. And those have impacted different people not just from Metro Manila, but we have people from the provinces come and like take buses just to be able to attend their conference. And it's a really great feeling to be able to see all those young women bonding together over learning how to code for the first time or learning about
Mm-hmm.
biotechnology for the first time. But my team and I couldn't help but notice that from those participants at that Women in Tech conference back in 2018, the first one, most of them came from middle to upper class backgrounds, and that they had like the Wi-Fi access, they had the resources like a laptop, for instance, at home to further their CS education, turn the inspiration into action. And in the Philippines, where I'm sure like most of the people watching know, is like a developing country, only approximately 20% of the population, according to the Philippine Statistics Authority, has constant access to Wi-Fi and a desktop or laptop at home. So in reality, our Women in Tech conference was really just geared towards that minority. And if we wanted to really live out that principle of equality and accessibility in tech, we needed to make sure that the 50-50 that we were vying for in the tech industry was going to be a socio-economically diverse 50-50. And that's what catalyzed our Women in Tech Teach program. That's what prompted us to go to Marawi, Bohol, different parts of QC to bring introductory CS modules, CS equipment, etc., to different low-income communities that have basically never heard of tech before. Like we worked with a
Mm-hmm.
community in Marawi, wherein of the 37 high school students, only one had ever heard of coding before. And when we asked the student like, "What is coding?" he said, "Oh, the it's that thing where you type really fast." Like,
Okay,
and
yeah.
and we laughed, but honestly, it's a really sobering thought that that was the
Mm-hmm.
highest extent of knowledge about CS, about programming in that community. And WeTech is really pushing towards, like right now we've taught 100 students how to code for the first time, but we're pushing for more and more of that, more and more communities that we want to equip with CS materials like secondhand and first and brand new laptops through our fundraisers. Like we do all of these things because we want to make sure that it isn't just by circumstance that young people go into technology. Like we believe that tech should be a right when it is currently a privilege. And especially
Okay.
during COVID-19, where tech is basically synonymous with education, we're going to be leaving millions of Filipino students behind if we don't equip them with the resources that they need to learn.
I can't agree with you more on a lot of things, and it's really nice to see how you took action based on something you noticed and turned it into your passion, and yeah, like you said, into action. Given COVID-19 now, how has the break from face-to-face education or face-to-face interaction contributed to your startup?
The great thing about VTEC is that even before COVID-19, most of our organization really communicated online via
Mm-hmm.
platforms like Facebook, Messenger, etc. Like right now for our 2020 to 21 cycle, we have a Discord server. And that's mostly because our members are situated not just in different parts of the world, but different parts of the Philippines. So it's very difficult to get face to face meetings in the first place. So when COVID
Okay.
19 struck, we really pretty much seamlessly transitioned to these online meetings because we already were doing them anyway. The biggest difference for us was really having to sadly cancel our in-person
Uh,
WeTeach and WitCon for 2020, and we're really analyzing now how to make our conferences, our talks, our events digital for the 2021 cycle. So that was a big adjustment, but I think our
mhm.
pivot into this kind of new normal hasn't been that rough because all of our members are essentially Gen Z. So they've grown up with
Yeah.
technology pretty much mostly at their fingertips. And a lot of them are very adept. A lot of our members, a lot of our community are very much go getters and very much are asking questions like, okay, so how do we adapt based on these circumstances? How do we bring tech education to these students, to these teachers, to these communities, given that we can't physically go out to these
Yeah.
sites? And a lot of these solutions have turned into our fundraiser in partnership with Unang Hakbang Foundation. So we were able to raise 150,000 pesos as well as four laptop donations and one smartphone donation for UHF, which is basically a foundation that provides low income and at risk of dropping out students with the mentorship, tutoring, and resources that they need to stay in school and keep up with their online education. So that was a really great partnership that we just wrapped up
Hmm.
and that
Yeah.
began and ended during this quarantine period. And with
Okay.
our chapters as well, like we're also working on online initiatives. Like our New York chapter, for instance, is planning a Filipinas in STEAM webinar series to be launched next school year. Our Laguna chapter is working on a series of webinars as well with entrance fees, and all the funds raised from the entrance fees go to the Unang Hakbang Foundation as well for the students to be able to afford devices. So we're still very much learning, very much adjusting, but the work definitely does not stop because of the
Yeah.
pandemic. If
Yeah. Yeah.
anything, we've realized that it's even more needed during this time.
I can't agree with you more again on these points, because they really are evident now, especially as you said in the pandemic. You guys have achieved so much at such a young age, right? So, my last question would be, what advice could you give to your fellow college students, or just fellow students out there, with regards to school life, college life, and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, really great question. And thank you as well. I'd have to say that if there's anything I've learned from these past 4 years with VTEC, these past 4 years in the nonprofit space, it's that if you go into the nonprofit space or if you start an initiative, anything really, whether it's a blog, a social media site, or just really, if you start anything for the wrong reasons, then it's not going to be successful.
Hmm.
And what I mean is that if you start something for the college app, if you start something for the clout and for the recognition, you're not in it for the right reasons and you're not going to be truly motivated to help solve the issue at hand. Always anchor yourself in the community and the impact, because those are true gauges of success. If you gauge how, or if you try to measure your success in terms of how many followers you have, say how much like reach your social media has, like I honestly, in my opinion, don't think that's the right way to go. Because at the end of the day, you should feel fulfillment from the people and the problem that you are trying to help solve. Like that's something you should anchor yourself in. That should be your why. And when you have that why, you can pivot in your solutions. Like I saw
Hmm.
this really good quote online. I forgot who said it, but don't fall in love with your solution, fall in love with the problem that you want to help solve. With VTech, I never thought that our blog that was launched in 2016 would turn into anything more than a blog. But we ended
Yeah.
up adapting because of the needs in our community. We did the Women in Tech conference. We started the Women in Tech Teach program. We no longer just advocate for gender equality in tech, but tech accessibility as well, because we see the intersectionality of both issues. And by being open to adapting to different solutions, I think that WeTech has grown into not just a really, really wonderful nonprofit that's created such widespread impact, but also a really great community for like-minded people from around the world who believe in principles like equality, to connect and make friends and foster friendships that have spanned past work and really into
Yeah.
different conversations about life. So
Yeah.
really don't do things for the cloud, do things for the right reasons, and know that at the end of the day, if you start an advocacy, you have to be able to commit the time on top of college apps and top of extracurriculars on top of academics. And if you truly love the work that you do, then that time that you commit isn't going to be as stressful. Like, yes, it still
Yeah.
will be stressful, but it won't seem like a sacrifice because you're doing something that you love, as cliche as it sounds.
Thank you very much, for sharing your story, and moreover for the story that you'll be sharing later in this month. I'm really excited to learn more about your story and Women in Technology story as an organization. So I hope, to all our viewers out there, I hope you are as excited as I am, and so do catch Audrey's story later coming this month.